Do you want to know what keeps me up at night? When Rayman's hair spins, how does it not just get tangled up? Does the skin on top of his head also spin around? Ever wonder what that would look like up close? Sounds freaky to me, but thankfully Rayman is taking steps to cut back on his hovering, and I for one support him on his road to recovery. And he's not about to let a little thing like a hoodlum invasion putting his friends in mortal peril break his no hovering vow. So, can we beat Rayman 3 without hovering? Let's find out. If you've seen our Rayman 2 hoverless video, then you know the gist already, but here's a reminder of the rules. But first, I just want to say that if you enjoy challenge run videos like this, then you're on the right channel. Please subscribe, and you can even follow our Twitch channel if you want to watch these challenge runs being performed live. Back to the rules. The first rule is obvious. We cannot hover at all during gameplay. In fact, we cannot let Rayman's hair spin for any reason during gameplay. Rule number 2, using glitches is fine, just no hacking. And rule number 3, once we defeat Reflux, the final boss of the game, we win! Please note, if Rayman's hair spins during cutscenes, then that's fine, as we have no control over that. Something else that's important to mention, we will be playing the GameCube version of the game, as a good number of things you're about to see in this video are not possible on other versions. We did this in our Rayman 2 video as well, so we'll do it again in this video. Take a guess now what you think the minimum number of hovers is required to beat this game, and then post it in the comments below. Let's see how close you can get. As soon as the game begins, Rayman has lost his hands, and since we won't be hovering, all we can do right now is jump, kick, strafe, and roll. There is also a first-person view button and even a photo mode. Pointless as they may seem, we'll be making use of everything at our disposal to get around without hovering. Since this is the game's tutorial, it isn't long before we are intended to hover over a wide gap. Our normal jumps won't be enough to make it over, and Rayman still doesn't have his hands, so he can't grab on the edge either, so it's time to bring on some glitches. Rayman 3's geometry can be more than a little bit janky, especially on the GameCube version. On the lower part of the area, we can stand on a sloped part at the base of a large tree. We can't make it too far up this slope on foot, but if we roll into the slope at the right angle, Rayman is flung into the air. This is high enough to reach the top of the area beyond the gap that we couldn't hover over before. Shortly after that, we give Glowbox a good kicking and then retrieve our hands. Now we can throw punches, literally. We make our way through the next area. Early on, the platforming is simple, and soon we find our first power-up. The green power-up allows us to fire tornadoes from our fists, but only for a short time. We can do this to lower other certain platforms to reach higher ledges. In the very next area, we use another green power-up to lower some platforms and then monkey bar our way across some vines. But immediately following that, we need to make it over a long, slippery slope. Normally, we would use the 2 bouncy platforms floating above the slope to get over it. However, the distance between them is just too much. We'll never reach the second one normally without hovering, but there is a way. In order to progress beyond this point, we need to restart the area by saving the game, quitting the game, and reloading the game. Now, from the start of the area up until we reach that slope, we need to make sure that we don't grab onto the edge of any ledges. Grabbing an edge or pausing the game for the first time in any given area sets a flag in the game's code, which remains there until we enter a new area or reload the current area. We need to avoid that flag being set at all costs, as we won't be able to execute certain glitches in our current area. For now though, we need to get back to that slope without grabbing an edge. Normally, we would grab the edge of the platform that we lower down and then pull ourselves up. We can't afford to do that this time. If we want to get up here without grabbing on an edge, we need to perform our first super jump glitch. But first, we need to have entered first person view at least once before our first super jump in any area. If we strafe over the edge of certain ledges and then quickly hold the first person view button just as we're about to fall, Rayman will perform a super jump. It's a very unintended method of gaining height, and it seems to be caused by the game not expecting Rayman to be falling in first person view. The timing can be quite precise, and it's easier on some ledges than others. In fact, there are many edges in the game where it isn't possible at all. It also helps a lot to be in an area where we have free control of the camera, but the height we get can vary a lot depending on the angle, timing, geometry, and whether we have free camera control. After super jumping onto this platform, we are free to use the vines to climb without setting that flag in the code, as it's only specifically grabbing on edges that sets it. Once we're back at the slope, we can now perform a glitch thanks to that flag not being set in the code, and it's called the moon bounce. This trick also only works in fixed camera locations, but fortunately this slope room is a fixed camera location. First, we must jump onto the bouncy platform. Then, we must enter photo mode directly after bouncing. Now we need to hold the first person view button and keep it held whilst we cancel photo mode. If we get the timing right, Rayman will bounce even higher than normal, with a sort of floaty feel. This is more than enough to make it over to the second bouncy platform, where we perform the moon bounce once more and make it over to the other side. The rest of the area can be done just fine. It is a bit awkward getting up the broken stairs, but since we can now grab on edges again, we get up there fine. The next thing we know, Glowbox swallows Andre, and we've got to escort Glowbox to a doctor through Clearleaf Forest. The first area is fine, as Glowbox will just carry us up the waterfall, and then it introduces the red power-up that strengthens our punches. Shortly after that, there is a large chasm that we're supposed to hover over to reach a ledge at the end. If we fall down, we need to use the ladder to climb back up to the start. We're never going to make this with a regular jump, so we need to revisit the super jump. The first thing to do is find an edge that allows the super jump to work. Sometimes I find that the corners of certain bits of geometry work better than the flat edges. There is a corner low down that works, but a regular super jump just doesn't give us the height we need. But we can perform an even better version of the super jump, the extended super jump. The only difference in the setup is that we keep the first person button held down for longer during a normal super jump. Doing so will keep us in first person view whilst Rayman is flung into the air in a sort of an arc. The direction that we get flung like this depends on the direction that we're moving and facing before the jump, but we can't change direction in mid-air unless we let go of the first person button, and as soon as we do that, we start to fall. So we need to make sure that we're directly above the ledge we're trying to reach before letting go of the first person button, and with that, we make it over there. Directly after that, we have another chasm, and normally we would use the blue power up here to swing over the gaps, but without being able to hover, these gaps are too wide. However, if we just run to the bottom of the last ledge, we can perform a regular super jump off the side of the small bridge to reach the top. The next few areas are all clearable without hovering, as most platforming is vertical from here. This is the case right up until the boss fight at the end of the level. The boss does not require our helicopter at all, as all we need is an orange power up to fire rockets, and then we use the boss's own contraption to stomp on all the hoodlums. Now we start the next level, the Murky Bog, and early on we find a yellow power-up that allows us to fly temporarily. The power-up adds a real propeller to Rayman's head, so you could argue that this is not Rayman's hair spinning when he's using the yellow power-up. And with that argument, it should be fine to use, but we're not about to let Rayman have a taste of hovering now, not when he's so close to kicking the habit altogether. So no, we will not be allowing the helicopter from the yellow power-up either. Fortunately, we can just jump into the piranha-infested waters and damage boost our way from platform to platform. Just make sure not to take too much damage from the piranhas each time we jump in, or Rayman will just die. That's pretty much the only challenging part of this level in a no hover run. The reason being is that there are just 2 boss fights back to back shortly after, and neither of these bosses require any hovering at all, so we beat them both casually and move on. The next level is the Land of the Livid Dead, and very early on, we cannot reach this high ledge. We're supposed to throw a plum onto a pike below the ledge, and then use that to stand on, but the plum is also on a high ledge behind a waterfall. To get to the plum, we're supposed to use a yellow power-up to fly up there. We can use the nearby orange power-up to shoot the plum with a rocket, but that only knocks the plum out of the tree and not off the ledge. There is a turtle wandering around on the ground, and it is possible to carry the turtle and then put them down wherever you want. If you place a turtle against a wall, then it is possible to jump off the turtle's back, but even that doesn't get us enough height to reach either of these 2 ledges. There is a second turtle on top of the ledge that we're trying to reach, but that's no good to us if we can't reach it in the first place. We can't even shoot the second turtle down off the ledge with a rocket either. Also, the surrounding geometry does not allow us to perform a regular super jump like we've used before, but we do have another trick. This glitch also requires us to have not grabbed a ledge or paused the game in the area first. So once again, we save, quit, and reload the game. This will be a bit bit like the moon bounce in the setup, only we're going to do it as we jump against a very specific part of the geometry, and that part just so happens to be below the ledge we're trying to reach. We jump against the wall, enter photo mode, hold first person view button, cancel photo mode, and if our very precise positioning is correct, then Rayman will get flung into the air once more, and we can land right where we need to be. Now, you would think we're done with this area, but unfortunately, Glowbox needs to come with us. Otherwise, later parts of the level won't load properly, and also he's useful in reaching a ledge later on. To get Glowbox up here, we need to put that plum on the pike. But now that we've made it up here, we can throw the second turtle down to the start of the area. With that, we can carefully stack the turtles on top of one another below the waterfall. It's a bit tricky, but it can be done. From here, we can bounce off the turtle stack that we just created and reach the ledge for the plum. From there, we throw the plum down and then onto the pike. Now we can jump up the intended way and Glowbox will now follow us. Just be careful though, if you go back to the two turtles again, you might interrupt something. So sorry. The area immediately following the enemies has a shoe battle, but no hovers. Right after that though, we need to use a blue power up to swing to some balloons. But the first balloon is just too far away. Normally, we would grab the hook from further away to allow for a longer chain on the swing, but we don't get a bigger swing here since we're too close to the ground. We could mess around with this hook for ages and we probably could figure something out eventually, but we learned about something else we could do. Whenever we failed to perform a super jump, not only will Rayman simply fall over the edge that we're standing over, but sometimes Rayman will be pulled down extra hard as if gravity suddenly increased for that fall. This would give us fall damage regardless of how high the fall was. However, if we do this over water, the extra strong gravity ends up pulling Rayman under the water. Normally, Rayman would automatically float back up to the surface, but if we quickly swim under the level's geometry first, we can continue to swim out of bounds. This is quite tricky, and it took me a good number of attempts to finally get this right, but when we do, we can swim to the surface of the invisible water until we swim back inbounds. We want to swim back into a later part of the area, and apparently it's possible to swim very close to the end of the area like this, but we ended up getting back in bounds about halfway through. We find that our path is blocked by a breakable door, but we need the red power up to break it. If we backtrack a little bit from here, we can see a Teensy that we need to rescue, but the game won't let us free him until the Hoodlum below is defeated first. Thankfully, it's possible to hit the Hoodlum from the upper ledge with curved punches, as we don't want to fall back down there and get trapped. Once we defeat this Hoodlum, we get our red power up and we can break down the door. We defeat the enemies after the door, and now the game wants us to use another yellow power up to reach the top. The crates and wooden bridges around here can be used to get super jumps, but they're very fiddly. An easier way to the top is to use the roll like we did in the tutorial. If we stand on this crate at this angle, hold strafe, and then roll straight forward into the wall, we gain height and we can reach the top. The very next area starts off with a short cutscene of a Hoodlum locking a big wooden gate. The end of this level is directly behind that gate. If we were able to skip this gate somehow, then we'd end up skipping the entire area. It is possible to skip this gate with a super jump and then hover over the gate, but in a hoverless run this is much more difficult, and we just couldn't pull it off. We could play the area casually instead and find out if that's possible, but wouldn't you know it, we're supposed to reach the top of 2 towers before that gate will open. But let's give this a try. We managed to reach the top of the first tower with some difficult swinging. The idea is to grab onto a hook from as far away as possible for the maximum arc on the swing. Once the first big swing is out of the way, the rest are much easier. It's the second tower that's a lot more difficult. Early on, the game expects us to use a yellow power up to reach a balloon. There's no chance of a super jump in this room as there are no edges. The only chance we had of reaching that balloon was to use the lone Hoodlum enemy in the room to shoot us into it with a damage boost, but in my haste, I killed the Hoodlum as soon as I entered the room. I was about ready to restart the area and try again, but that's when I learned of a different way to skip this entire area completely. We said that if we could find a way to skip that gate at the beginning of the area, then we can completely skip these 2 tower climbs. And if you remember, there was a cutscene of a Hoodlum locking that gate at the start. So what if there was a way to stop the Hoodlum from closing that gate in the first place? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. If we reload the game to start this area from the beginning, but during the load loading screen before the cutscene, we need to hold the strafe button up on the left analog stick and then mash the jump button as fast as we can. If we do those three things right, then we will see Rayman beginning to move during the cutscene. Just make sure to stop mashing the jump button as soon as we gain control. We only see Rayman on screen very briefly before the game cuts to the Hoodlum, but as long as we keep both up and strafe held, Rayman will continue to move forward towards the gate whilst off screen during the cutscene. This is the tricky part though. The idea is to get as close to this Hoodlum as possible before the Hoodlum locks the gate. If we can get close enough in time, then we aggro the Hoodlum before he hits the lever. In order to get close enough in time, we need to perform very specific movements whilst Rayman is off screen. Whilst we're holding up and strafe, we need to very quickly slide the left analog stick to the right twice during the cutscene. There is a very helpful video on this by Rayman content creator Robin, and his video shows on screen exactly when to press those two right inputs during the cutscene. If we don't get the timing right, then we can just reload the level and try again as many times as we need. But eventually, after following Robin's video perfectly, we got the timing just right, and we were able to strafe close enough to aggro the Hoodlum before he hit the lever. This causes the Hoodlum to jump down, and then we can just run through the door and right to the end of the area. One of the longest parts in the game casually ends up being the shortest in this run. Following this is an underwater section, and this is the only part of the game where we have to submerge underwater. The problem with this though is that Rayman spins his hair like a propeller when submerging. It may not be hovering, but that's no excuse. We need to skip this underwater section. If you remember, we used a failed super jump earlier in the level to fall straight under the water, and then we could swim over the water's surface out of bounds. We need to do the exact same thing here. We fail the super jump timing, get pulled under the water, and if we get the right position and angle, we can get pulled underneath the ledge we're standing on. This allows us to start swimming out of bounds. From here, we need to swim all the way to the end of the area, but make sure to swim around the large underwater section so we don't get pulled back in bounds, because if we do, we'll be soft locked. The reason for this is that there's an underwater boss fight here, and if we swim back in bounds, we will be swimming as if we're on the surface of the water rather than submerged, and the only way to win this boss fight is to be submerged, otherwise it's impossible to avoid the boss's attacks. We can jump from here, but this just puts Rayman on his feet instead, and this doesn't help against the boss either. So as long as we stay swimming on the outer edge of the boss arena, we can swim all the way around and get right to the end, skipping the boss entirely. We start the next level, the desert of the Canaren. The very start of this level isn't an issue as all the gaps can be cleared with normal jumps, but following that, we find that we need to platform over dangerous green liquid to reach a yellow power-up and then fly up to the upper platforms. We can make it over the green liquid just fine, but we're still not using the copter from the yellow power-ups. It's time to talk about another glitch called glide walking. This is basically Rayman hovering, but with the game failing to activate the hover animation. We can activate glide walk by nailing an extended super jump and then holding the jump button in mid-air. It just so happens that one of the platforms nearby can be used to achieve this very extended super jump. From there, we can use glide walk to float. Now, a difference between glide walking and hovering is that if we glide walk into a sloped wall, Rayman will actually gain height. We need to be careful though, because if we glide walk into any other walls, we can lose altitude very quickly. At first, we used the glide walk strategy to make it onto the platform we need to reach. But there is a problem. It turns out, as soon as we activate the glide walk, Rayman's hair does actually spin for about half a second before he starts floating. We didn't see it the first time because the camera was going for a spin at the time, but it did happen. For that reason, we can't rely on the glide walk here. There is something much more amusing we can do instead. Right at the start of the area, Glowbox drinks a big barrel of plum juice. As soon as he does, he inflates and slowly floats to the top. This is the game's way of explaining how Glowbox is able to follow Rayman around, but in this instance, we can use this to our advantage. We need to very quickly stand on top of the barrel before Glowbox grabs it. As soon as Glowbox stands to the left of the barrel, we need to strafe on top of his head before he picks up the barrel. This is the only way we're able to stand on top of Glowbox without falling off. And now, when he inflates and floats up, we get carried up as well. The balance is very tricky. As soon as Glowbox starts floating, Rayman is constantly slipping off. But if we maintain our balance long enough, we can jump onto an upper platform. This still isn't high enough, but from here, we can perform a regular super jump to reach an even higher ledge. Now, since we're on the left side of the cliff instead of the right side, we need to make our way to the right. We can get to the middle above the bridge, but not to the ledge on the far right. All we need to do from here is jump down to the bridge below, and then use the edge of the bridge to get an extended super jump to the right. The perfect angle can be achieved by strafing backwards over the edge. From there, we can play the rest of this part casually to get the red power up and break down the door. Now we face the Canaren themselves. We use orange power-ups here to ring the gongs, which distracts their attention away from where we need to go. And early on, this can be done casually without the need to hover. There is a hook that we need to use to swing over a big gap, but as we mentioned before, if we make sure to grab the hook at the last second as we're falling, the chain length is at its maximum, which gives us a wider swing, and with that, we can make it over the gap. The next issue is the tall room with several floating platforms. It's possible to jump up these platforms the intended way to reach the top of the bird statue, but then we're expected to use a yellow power-up from there. If we roll from the bird statue's head at an angle towards the left wing, then sometimes Rayman will gain height mid-roll. It's inconsistent to say the least though, and doing this we never got the height we needed. However, there is a better way. All the way back on the ground, there are some stairs. If we stand to the right of the stairs, we can get an extended super jump all the way to the ceiling and beyond. Once we're in midair, we need to time it right to when to let go of that first person button so that we can free fall onto the ledge that we're trying to reach at the very top. We missed this more than once, but with enough practice we're finally able to land it. The next challenge is the very next area. We need to climb the walls to make it over the heads of the Canaren below, but without being able to hover, we can't make it from one climbable wall to the next. Falling down here means we get chased by the Canaren back to the start, and unfortunately, the Canaren cannot be damaged at all, and when they touch you, they force you back with their barriers. We did discover something interesting though. When Rayman takes fall damage, he comically squashes up like a pancake. Afterwards, he can crawl for a few seconds whilst he has immunity frames. If we fall from up high and land as close to the Canaren as possible, we can crawl through their barriers during our immunity frames. I really wish this ended up being the solution here though, but unfortunately there is one more Canaren just beyond the first three, and our immunity frames don't last long enough to get past that one. Instead, we need to rely on another super jump, but this one is a bit different, as this one moves us horizontally instead of vertically. From the edge of the small ledge before the climbable wall, we need to perform the steps for a super jump, but first we need to free the camera from its fixed position. If we force the camera to move to one side, it eventually frees it. Now, instead of strafing over the edge, we run over the edge normally at the right angle. As soon as we enter first person view, the super jump sends us quite far horizontally. The aim takes a bit of trial and error, but once we get it right, we can grab the edge at the other side. The next couple of areas can be played casually. There is a platforming section with ledges that raise and lower, but the worst case here is that we just used damage boosting to cross over. This takes us right to the boss fight of the level, and this fight can be done without any hovering at all. It does make avoiding the AoE attacks more difficult since we can't hover over them, but there is enough red lums over the edge of the arena that we can use for healing. Once the boss is dead, we learn to scare black lums, and on our way out we fight a bunch more hoodlums. And now we need to make our way through the longest shortcut. Despite this level being very heavy on the platforming, the vast majority of it can be done casually. The reason for this is that it's mostly gimmicked platforming, like invisible ledges and timed sections, etc. But most of all, it can be done without any hovering. It's far more difficult for sure, but it's far from impossible. The only part here that seems to fully require a hover is to get to the opening high up in the wall. Hovering seems to be the only option here, so let's try the extended super jump. Something we haven't mentioned yet. During an extended super jump, if we stop holding the first person button, but then immediately spam the first person button very fast, Rayman will gain even more height than normal. We must keep up the first person button mashing to gain as much height as possible, but with this we can launch Rayman so high, we go right through the ceiling. This is a bit overkill for this jump though. A regular extended jump is enough to reach the opening, and with that we set sail on a ship docked nearby. However, it isn't long before the ship is attacked by a horde of sea creatures. There are 4 cannons on the ship, left, right, top and bottom. Whenever a sea creature approaches the ship from one of these 4 sides, we punch the respective cannon to kill the creatures. This continues until either they're all dead or the ship takes enough damage and we game over. The big problem we face here is that the bottom cannon is on a raised part of the ship and we're intended to use the yellow power up to get up there. Thankfully, there is an opening on the side of the ship with some secret gems on it. We can use this ledge to pull off a tricky super jump and reach the bottom cannon, but this would mean that we need to perform that tricky super jump every time we're attacked from the bottom. There is an easier way though. All the sea creatures share one long health bar. The direction they attack from is random, but once they pick a direction they stay there until they're blasted. What we need to do is ignore the bottom cannon completely and then simply run in a triangle formation between the other 3 cannons, hitting them as we go. If we keep that up throughout the whole battle, then it's possible to reduce their collective health bar so much that it gets really close to depleting. Once it gets this close, it stops any more sea creatures from spawning at these 3 sides. If we're fast enough, the boat should have just enough durability left for us to use that opening for a super jump to reach the bottom cannon, which we can then use to kill what are now the last 2 remaining sea creatures. This way we only have to perform that super jump once. This brings us to the summit beyond the clouds, and very early on we're expected to use a yellow power up to fly up a snowy cliff. It took a lot of tries thanks to the giant snowballs rolling down the cliff, but if we strafe backwards over the edge behind us, we can super jump to the next level. Right after that, we need to swing to some balloons to get even higher up the cliff, and this is very tricky due to how close the hook is to the ground. The hook is simply not close enough to the first balloon to reach it without hovering. Again, I'm sure there's a way we can use the hook to get over there, but instead we can use yet another glitch, and it involves these breakable piggy banks. We need to make sure to spare the piggy bank up here. First, we lock onto it by holding the strafe button, then we jump on top of it. Since we're still locked on, punching will now still hit the piggy bank, but if we don't charge up our punch then it won't break. Instead, a normal punch will make the piggy bank bounce a little bit, and we can use this for a super jump. As soon as the piggy bank bounces from a punch, we walk backwards 1 step and then very quickly enter photo mode. Then, just like with a normal super jump, we hold the first person view button and cancel photo mode. If we timed it right with the piggy bank's bounce, we get the perfect super jump to just reach the next part of the cliff. So it's time to start getting into the habit of not destroying piggy banks. You never know when you might need one. It's possible to make our way to the very top from here, but just make sure that you grabbed the blue power up from earlier at least once. Otherwise, the enemies up top here won't descend from above like they're supposed to, and then we can't make any further progress. It's actually possible to see the enemies in the sky where they should be parachuting down, and whereas we can hit one of them from here, we can't hit all of them. But as we said, as long as we get the blue power up before the piggy bank super jump, the level should proceed as normal. The area after that has a good number of yellow power ups that are meant to be used to reach high up ledges. There is a piggy bank nearby, but a super jump from that isn't quite enough to make it up there. However, this whole section can be bypassed completely by super jumping off an earlier piggy bank and straight to the end of the area. After a snowboarding section, we fall inside the Hoodlum Headquarters. And early on, there's not much to mention here. The biggest challenge for most of this level will be hordes of enemies, or the bigger hoodlums. There is a section where we jump from crate to crate, but even then we can use damage boosts if we need to. As tall and perilous as this climb looks, it can actually be done fairly casually with no hovers at all. The level's finale is where things get difficult. After we damage the big machine, we need to outrun the rising lava, and it's made a good deal more challenging without being able to hover. For example, we can't reach this climbable mesh without landing in the lava first, but we can just damage boost from the lava and jump right back up and grab onto the mesh. So despite the increased difficulty, this is all still very doable. This brings us to the penultimate level, the Tower of the Lepties. And like the Hoodlum Headquarters, we're thrust into a lot of fights against a lot of hoodlums. After defeating what feels like an army of hoodlums, and then finish another shoe battle, that's when we get our yellow power up thrown at us. We're supposed to use it to fly up and then swing our way to the top of the level and right back to the start upon where we'll have access to a new yellow power-up to reach a high ledge. Of course, we can't do any of that, but if we're able to reach that last high ledge from the start, then we could bypass the need for the yellow power-ups. We can clearly see the ledge right above us, but it's just out of reach. Apparently, this ledge can actually be reached from the ground with the perfect jump, but I'm not sure if that depends on the version of the game you're playing. Either way, we couldn't reach it from the ground in this run. Instead, if we fall back down the hole where we first entered the level, there is a piggy bank down here. You can use this for a super jump back up through the hole and land on a wooden beam close by. We need to make it over to the other end of the wooden beam, but it's quite hard to keep our balance up here as we're not really supposed to be standing on this. Once we're on the other side, we can use the corner of it to achieve another super jump and make it over to that ledge. We're now at the bottom of a tall tower climbing section. There's a trail of balloons that gets us to the first spinning part of the tower, and we can use that to reach the spiral staircase. At the top of these stairs is a blue power-up, followed by a lengthy trail of hooks and balloons that circle the tower. Unfortunately, we're struggling to make the first swing to the first balloon. I'm sure it's possible, but there is a way to make this part easier for ourselves. If we ride the spinning ledges as soon as we get the blue power up, and then wait until it rotates us all the way around, we can reach a later hook, which bypasses the first swing. This particular blue power up lasts quite a long time, and it's just long enough to reach the next blue power up partway through the swing. The distance between the balloons is getting wider. We need to make sure that we're landing as far forward on each of these balloons as possible to ensure that we can reach the next one. It's a difficult stretch, but once we make it all the way, we reach the spiral stairs once more, and then we can land on the second spinning ledges. Now the game wants us to use a yellow power up to reach the top. With no other option, we need to find a super jump. However, the spinning ledges don't allow for a super jump at all. But the top of the stairs is a different story. A super jump from here can get us all the way to the platform before the opening in the wall. We run into an obstacle up here though. We're supposed to hover from one ladder to the other, but no matter how hard we tried, we just could not grab that second ladder without hovering. Our progress halted by such a simple obstacle. This means our only option is to find another super jump. The only edge is at the very opening that we entered to get to these ladders. Fortunately, this edge can be used for a super jump. However, this had to be the most difficult super jump in the run so far. We failed the angle and the timing so many times that I began to lose hope. It's possible to get launched very high here with an extended super jump, but if we don't get the angle right, we'll never land on the ledge above those ladders. But after literally 6 hours of attempts, we achieved this extended super jump. We have only just managed to land on the very edge of the ledge that's above the ladders, which means we can carry on as normal. Only we find ourselves in a very small yet very tall room, and we need to scale to the very top of it. It's a very long way up, and once we start climbing, the room fills with lava, so we must avoid falling back down. The issue is though, we can't get very up this tall room before we're expected to use the yellow power-ups again. The higher you get in this room, the more yellow power-ups there are floating in the air. It's intended that we fly from one to the next to keep the copter power-up topped up as we fly to the very top. Once again, we look to the extended super jump as our alternative, and if we use the very corners of the wooden platforms, we can get a very high super jump. The problem we face with this is the arc we get off the super jump. It causes Rayman to collide with the walls, and as soon as Rayman hits a wall during an extended super jump, he stops dead and falls straight back down. As we mentioned before, we cannot control the angle and direction of the super jump after our feet have left the ground. We also can't alter the upward arc on an extended super jump. It's either directly up or at the very same specific arc every time, the arc that puts us into the wall every time. When going directly up from the corner with an extended super jump, with the perfect positioning on the corner, it's possible to fall back down on that very same corner and then bounce back up again. We can even chain this seemingly infinitely. We have to be mashing the first person view button the entire time or the bounce will stop. When we get a bounce during an extended super jump like this, the height we get looks like it might have been just enough to reach that opening, but without being able to get close to the edge, we couldn't know for sure. After several more hours of testing, it was looking bleak, but then we discovered something. It's possible to activate glide walk during the extended super jump by holding the jump button in the air. Now, of course, we already mentioned that a glide walk causes Rayman's hair to spin, for a split second, and we banned it for that reason. However, if we activate the glide walk whilst we have the yellow power up, the copter doesn't come out of Rayman's helmet. This is due to the copter animation taking longer to start compared to Rayman's hairspin. It also turns out that if we activate a glide walk directly after a bounce, we maintain the height on the extended super jump, but now we have complete movement control. The glide walk itself only lasts as long as the yellow power-up lasts. Otherwise, Rayman will start to hover normally as soon as it runs out. So, here's the plan. After we bounce upwards from an extended super jump, we collect a yellow power-up in midair. We then fall back down and land a successful bounce. On the way back up, we hold the jump button to start a glide walk whilst we have a yellow power-up. The copter animation takes too long to start, thus it never occurs. Now, as we're ascending, we need to move Rayman to collect more yellow power-ups on the way up to maintain it for as long as possible. As soon as we get close to the apex of this super jump, we need to move to the edge of the opening we're trying to reach. Once we're as close as possible, we need to quickly let go of the jump button to end the glide walk, making sure we do so before the yellow power-up runs out. If we're close enough to the ledge, then as soon as we let go of the jump, Rayman should just be able to grab the edge, as he won't grab it during a glide walk itself. But we are mere millimeters away from grabbing the edge like this. Talk about being so close yet so far. However, there is one more thing we can add to this crazy setup. Do you remember how we mentioned that if we glide walk into a sloped wall, we can gain height? Well, the walls around here look very vertical, and most of the time if we glide walked into any of these walls, we would lose height very quickly. However, there's one small part of the wall that is ever so slightly sloped by the smallest of degrees. It's very tricky, but if we angle Rayman during a glide walk so that he's almost parallel to the wall, then if we're in the right spot, and if we do it quick enough before the power-up runs out, then we can just wiggle our way against the wall to gain enough height to reach the opening. Okay, I'll level with you. I understand that some people might consider this a grey area in the no hovering rule, since we are taking advantage of a delayed hover animation, so you're free to consider the challenge a failure right here, but considering how many hours I was stuck here, I will happily take this. I'm happy knowing that the hair never span and the copter never span. Right after, there is a conveyor of wooden platforms. We can jump from one to the next most of the time, but now and then there is a wider gap between them that we can't jump over. We need to time it so that we are above one of the balloons when these larger gaps are coming up, so that we can use the balloon to bounce off of instead of needing to hover. The second balloon will allow us to reach a blue power-up, so we can just swing to the end. Now we must perform a hook swing at the end of a trail of balloons that's simply too far to make, no matter how far away we are when we grab the hook. We tried to get a super jump at the bottom of the edge of the lava, but no luck. So we're finally able to show off the hook jump technique. First, we jump off the swing backwards whilst holding the strafe button. Then, in midair, we grab the hook again, and then we very quickly jump off the hook before we start to swing. Off that second jump, we let go of strafe, rotate 180 degrees in midair, and with that, we can just grab onto the edge. The final challenge of this level is a long series of balloon bounces up another tower with rising lava. But with how many balloons there are littered around in this tower, this can be done without hovering no problem. We then finish a simple ship flying / rail shooter section to finish this level. That brings us to the final boss of the game, Reflux, and this boss has several phases. The first phase is all about using the blue and red power-ups to attack him whilst avoiding his attacks, so no issue in a hoverless run. The second phase sees Reflux become a giant, and now we're running around him in circles to reach the required blue and red power-ups. Not being able to hover makes avoiding his wide swings harder, but if we jump as he hits the ground, it's usually not a problem. Once we climb onto his back and attack his orb enough times, we move on to his third phase. This is the phase that normally requires a lot of yellow power-ups to fly from one floating rock to the next, all the way until we reach the very top. These rocks all float up into their places during a cutscene, but of course we can't play this phase as intended, so our first thought is to go back to the tried and true super jumps. The issue with super jumps here though is that they have limited effectiveness on moving platforms platforms, like these rocks, plus the first layer of rocks is so high up that even an extended super jump wouldn't be enough. We do have a strategy though, and the setup starts at the very moment we defeat Phase 2. As soon as we land the final blow to end Phase 2, the screen will cut to black in a single frame, and then immediately it will fade into a cutscene before Phase 3 starts. Normally we can't enter photo mode during cutscenes, but if we press photo mode button on the very same frame that the screen cuts to black, it works. This is likely due to the cutscene not quite starting yet. Now, if we take a photo, we are prompted to name it. We can then cancel the naming screen to go back to photo mode, and then we can cancel photo mode, but very quickly enter photo mode again within about 3 frames of cancelling it. We are now entering photo mode during the first few frames of the cutscene. This only works if you take a photo and go to name it, and then cancel the naming. We can do this repeatedly until we make it partway through the cutscene. Eventually the game cuts back to gameplay earlier than it should, and the rocks haven't all floated up to their usual high up positions yet. The theory is that we can get on top of the rock that floats the highest before it gets too high. Unfortunately, the rocks start to float as soon as we gain control of Rayman, and we can't quite make it to the rocks in time. It's kinda close though. This means that after we buffer the cutscene with photo mode, we need to use one single super jump to make it up to the first layer of floating rocks as quickly as possible before they get too high up. We found an edge that works, but it was extremely tricky to execute. This was now the new most difficult super jump of the entire run. It's not so much the corner here that allows for the extended super jump, it's the corner of the geometry below it. So this is technically a bounce. Basically, with the perfect positioning and timing, we can fail a super jump to get Rayman to fall through the corner rather than over the edge. As long as we're mashing the first person button as we're doing this would allow us to achieve an extended super jump. The bounce is the exact same as the type of bounce we got in the Tower of Lepties, and if we get this bounce quick enough, we can get just enough height to reach the rising rocks before they get too high up. That was another few hours of attempts, but we finally pulled it off. Now we need to avoid Reflux's attacks as the rocks are rising, because if we get hit by them, we fall off. But now that we're up here, we need to find the part of the rock that will float to the highest point, and then stay on it until it reaches the very top where an orange power-up is waiting for us. As soon as we fire that ends Phase 3. The rest of the boss fight is completely free in a hoverless run, as it's just more ship flying and rail shooting. Finally, we scare Andre back into a red lum and the game is over. Can we beat Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc without hovering? As far as I'm concerned, yes, we can. I understand that it can be argued that the Tower of Lepties technically required one hover for the glide walk to work, but since Rayman's hair or copter never span, I'm happy with this run. A big thank you to the members of the Rayman Speedrun Discord server that helped me out with this challenge. This video would not exist without their help. And another big thank you to our subscribers over on Twitch. They are A Lazy Dragon, A Game Time Show, Andy Pandy, Bread General Doc, Chloe MFers, Crawling Wrestler, Cruel Pressure, D Blue J, Dino1303, Decaffeinated Soup, Duncan F93, Dweegi, Evolve Pixel, H Bruin, Jamhead91, John Fitz49, Justfin31, Lego Henry, I Hoffman, Lit Game 83, Mad King Cryptid, Major Vengeance, Miss Barbs 9, Mr. Griff, Mrs. Gears, Nurse Bobber, Platonic Penguin, Cyvel, Rewoo, Rich T Biscuit 93, Royal Snow Angels, Scary Gorbash, Spectrum Z90, Static Joke, Sunbro 77, Swamp Donkey, Tails Stream, T Brewing, The Overachiever, The Bloody Scream, Tor ZH, True DK0, and Z-Man Vader. And also a big thank you to our patrons. They are A Lazy Dragon and Anthony Kermack. Thank you very much, you beauties. It's you guys that help make it happen. Did you enjoy this video style? Well, there's many more just like it right here on NG Plus YouTube channel. All you have to do is subscribe. And if you ever wanted to see these challenge runs being performed live, then follow our Twitch channel as well. The links are all in the description.
Your patience is insane.
I know. Tim's as well. We've been at
Both of your patience.
We've been at this for a while.
It's insane. You got him to the door though.
I know. If you haven't seen our Rayman 2 hoverless video yet, then it's linked on screen now. Or maybe you're more interested in the original Spyro the Dragon trilogy without gliding. Because if you are, then boy do I have a playlist for you. Quickly, click one before it's too late!